Shapes and Sounds acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we're recording and connecting with you from, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. Hi everyone, it's Asami with you right now. And my question to you is this: have you ever struggled with navigating work relationships? Well, our guest today brings us on a big conversation about all the different kinds of relationships that we have at work, which, as you can imagine, is a huge, huge topic. For example, we have relationships with our colleagues or our bosses or our juniors, and it's always important to remember that these relationships with our work peers often are just as impactful to our mental health and our well-being as all the other important relationships in our lives. I would say it has a lot to do with the fact that we spend so much time at work. So, we invited one of the psychologists on our Asian mental health practitioner list, Sanduni, to shed some light on how we can foster good relationships at work, how we can deal with toxic work environments or difficult bosses, and how this can all help us continue on in our respective hustles. Sanduni is the lead psychologist and founder of In-Session Counselling, a psychology and couples therapy practice focused on supporting people from all cultural backgrounds. As a South Asian woman of colour, Sanduni started in-session counselling so that the complex nuances of a person's identity and experiences, such as cultural background, intergenerational history, and unique family dynamics, are seen, understood, and incorporated into the traditionally Western individualised process of therapy. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. Welcome to the Asian Mental Health Podcast, brought to you by Shapes and Sounds. So welcome, Sanduni. It's so lovely to have you here today.
Thank you, Asami. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. I wanted to start with this question. So you run a private psychology practice. What has it been like being your own boss? Just a very loaded question to begin with.
Yeah, it's a good question because I guess there's so many pros and cons and layers to it in a way. It sounds really liberating, and it is. You know, I choose my own hours, which I love. I really do a lot of breaks and start times and stuff really that work with my body, which I love that I can do and have the freedom and flexibility to do. I guess the con or the weight of it is that it's sort of all on me a little bit. There's a responsibility that I feel quite a lot of, you know, if it's if I take a couple of days off, then, you know, who's getting to the emails and stuff like that. So, and then even just micro decisions as well. I sort of think, you know, it'd be great to have like a team leader to kind of, you know, talk to about it. But I think the responsibility gets pretty heavy sometimes, but I think overall net it's worth it for me because I love the freedom and flexibility that I get out of it.
I totally hear you. I think it's like when you become your own boss and then you're like, oh my God, I'm so annoying. And so then it's like you are like battling with yourself almost, right? And then it's like you have to, I'm really learning that process of like trying to take care of myself as an employee and the boss, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like two different compartmentalized identities.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
But as you know, the theme of this season for the Asian Mental Health Podcast is called The Silent Hustle, Work and Mental Health. So I wanted to ask you, like, what comes to mind for you when you hear that, the silent hustle?
A little bit of sadness, I think, to be honest. Like it sounds kind of sad and lonely in a way. I guess the sadness maybe is linked to this idea of working really hard and pushing and hustling and, you know, really trying to do it all. But then the silence is sort of alone and people don't know, and it might seem really different on the outside to what's going on in the inside. So yeah, just the first thing that comes up hearing that term is probably a little bit of sadness.
Yeah. Does it resonate with you, or is it like, oh no, I've seen this in my work, but not something I really think about?
I think periods of time, yeah. And maybe that goes back to sort of being your own boss, not having colleagues at this stage, or a leader. I do have a supervisor, which is really supportive, who I meet with fortnightly, and I love that. It's like, oh, like, let me just vent, let me just be, and someone's sort of holding me, which is really nice. But yeah, definitely periods of time where I feel like I'm hustling, and then sort of feel like that responsibility I'm carrying a little bit alone, it sort of feels like. But yeah, I think, I try and balance it then with periods where I get to just have lightness and get to take time off when I want to and not have to ask anyone. So it's a balance of both, but definitely can relate to that term for sure.
Yeah. As you say, there's like always good things and bad things, right? And it makes me think, like, what made you decide to start your own business or to start your own practice and become your own boss?
I guess probably a little bit of a journey. So I worked in a couple of mental health organisations. I worked in Headspace for a little while, and then also local council as well. And I really enjoyed the work. I was working as a counsellor, and I loved the client work that I was doing. But I think I really didn't love the kind of constraints within which I was working, which was, you've got to be there at this time, you've got to finish this time. And at Headspace, we had sort of, it wasn't really KPIs, but there was sort of expectations of seeing 6 clients a day sometimes. And I sort of felt like some of those expectations were almost impeding on my ability to just be the best therapist that I felt I could be. I was tired and burnt out and those sorts of things. So I just think I longed to be able to choose my own hours. And I remember driving to work one day when I was at council, and I was like rushing and a bit late that day and sort of driving to get there. And then we started at 9, and I got there at 9. And then the first 45 minutes, we were all just kind of like having a coffee and chatting, which I love doing with my colleagues. But it's like, how silly that I'm like racing to get here just to be here at 9 when it doesn't really matter in a way.
True.
So yeah, it's just sort of that having to keep up that sort of expectation or save face a little bit. So yeah, I think I really wanted to work for myself and start my own thing. And I guess also specifically with the culturally responsive work that I do, I was seeing a lot of multicultural clients in the work that I was doing, and kind of wanted to sort of do more of that and go into that niche a little bit more as well. So, and have a practice that was dedicated to that. And so people kind of knew that that was the sort of therapy you're going to be getting. So yeah, I wanted to develop that as well.
Just out of curiosity, like you said, there, in some places there was an expectation to have 6 sessions a day. For you as a therapist, what is like your ideal in a day, how many sessions to run, and your ideal caseload size? This is like purely out of my own curiosity.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time like figuring it out and working with
takes time,
my
right?
capacity. Yeah. And I think I've got it pretty well. It feels really sustainable at the moment, and it's 4 clients a day. And I start at 11 or 12. Sometimes I do like a free initial call, which I offer new clients as well at 11, but my sessions start at 12. And then I have a 1 hour session, and then a half an hour break, and then a 1 hour session, and then a 1 hour break, and then a 1 hour session, half an hour break, and then the last session. So there's a 30-minute break minimum between each session, and in the middle of the day, there's a 1 hour break. And I just found like I could do the same number of sessions, but with 3 in a row and then a 1 hour break in one, for example, and it just used to feel so different. Like I'd be so depleted.
Yeah, wow.
Whereas the regular breaks actually, I mean, so obvious, but it made such a difference to how I felt at the end of the day. So yeah, 30-minute break minimum between sessions, sometimes an hour, which is essential for me.
Yeah.
And a late start as well.
And a late start, yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's like you're just piling through people. Like it's not sustainable for yourself nor for the people seeing and working with you, right?
Totally.
We've spoken a bit about mental health practitioners and burnout and things like that too. But before I get way too sidetracked, this episode we really wanted to focus in on relationships and work with you. Like there's so much to unpack here. And one thing that we found on your Instagram that really stuck out to us was this Esther Perel quote that you highlighted, which is, I'm going to read it out so I don't get it wrong. But we take our emotional and relational blueprints with us to work. Our team, we all thought this was really interesting and we wanted to dive into it. But to start with, could you just open up and explain this quote a little bit for us, and even maybe introduce who Esther Perel is for those that don't know?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Esther Perel. She's a couples therapist and she does a podcast called Where Should We Begin? And I just love that podcast. I think that's probably the main stuff from her that I've focused on and sort of resonated with. But the episodes of the podcast are real couples therapy sessions, and you're kind of like a fly on the wall and you get to sort of just listen in to the challenges couples are having. And she is a therapist that sort of supports them through it. But I think I love the podcast because it's just so normalizing to really often private challenges that people have in relationships, things like sex and affairs and, you know, resentments and things that we don't often see on Instagram and things like that. So I loved those episodes, and I love the way she kind of works with couples in that space. So that's a bit of Esther Perel. And in terms of that quote, she also, I think, has a bit of a spin-off podcast, which is all focused on work, which I haven't actually listened to too much, but I think it was from that work she's done that she was saying this sort of quote. But the emotional and relational blueprints that we take with us to work. And I almost imagine like all this stuff from our upbringing is like in a suitcase with us, and we're carrying that along as we go to work every day as well. So, and I think why it resonated with me was just because the situations we have at work, the workloads, the kind of people we interact with, all of that is sort of influencing or interacting with, you know, our inner world as well, and the early experiences we've had or just past experiences we had. So I think it's all sort of interrelated and interactional. And I think it's empowering to a degree as well, because by knowing what parts of yourself are happening there, what's going on there, where they come from, it sort of gives us a sense of agency to sort of understand, well, what are my blueprints and how can I sort of work with them, understand them to have a different experience or perception. So I really love that quote.
I really hear you on that metaphor of like people are just carrying around like literal baggage, right?
Literally
what we want to say.
True, yeah, baggage.
I think like as someone who like has a team or manages staff, I've also found that people come not just with baggage from like family or relationships and friends and things like that, but actually like the blueprint of their past direct report, like or their direct manager.
Very good point. Yeah.
And so then, especially for us, like working in mental health, I feel like there are lots of like workplaces where there's like a lot of toxicity and stuff flying around. So then if I'm working with like a new person, then it takes so much time to like, one, notice what's going on, being like, oh, that's the baggage that you're carrying. It takes a long time to get to that point. And then it's like, okay, let me try and like build up the trust again so that we are having a new relationship, because people like reenact their old relationships over and over.
Yeah.
So then it's like, oh my God. And then by then it's like 6 months time and then you're like, okay, I'm exhausted.
Yeah. The term baggage, I mean, it is that literal suitcase that we were talking about, but also I think something I've really kind of come to realize and see working with clients is sometimes the parts that we struggle with the most are also the parts that are our greatest strengths as well, in that like perfectionism, for example, can be something that's so challenging. It can lead to sort of a lot of paralysis or procrastination and be a big challenge, but it can actually lead to people, you know, doing really well in certain roles as well. So, the idea of baggage, it is in that sort of metaphor, but it's kind of just like learning to like work with it. I think.
It's
how
like
do
we
I
all
harness
have
it?
baggage. Like it is what it is. It's
Yeah.
like, doesn't necessarily mean like bad baggage.
Yeah. It can be like really harmful or hurtful to you, but if you sort of like work with it, then I think it can also be a strength in a way too. So just a thought I was having. Yeah,
I like that. And then what about if we bring in that cultural perspective and like just say your home environment and your home culture, as in like your family and relationships and like friends, is so very different to the work culture.
Yeah.
You know, how does that all interplay?
Yeah. I guess like in terms of the influence of the blueprints, it would be things like, maybe an example would be if you had sort of a really authoritarian sort of family or relationships, growing up, or even other relationships at previous jobs, for example, where it was very much like, this is what you got to do, this is what I say, no questions asked, really strict, really sort of forceful in that way. Then the blueprint would be whatever you learned to sort of do to cope with that, in that it might be to fawn, okay, I'll do whatever you need me to do so that I feel safe. Or it could be to rebel and protest, be like, no, screw this. Like, I shouldn't have to do this. I'm not going to do anything you say. Go the other way kind of thing. Or, or like perfectionism. I'll be the perfect person so I never get sort of criticized. I mean, we sort of learn ways to keep ourselves safe, to stay bonded to people in an early stage of our lives. And those kind of blueprints can happen in the relationships we have with people at work as well. And even things like schooling experiences as well. Like, school is almost like where we learn things like academic expectations or teachers and authority figures and stuff like that, and how we respond to structures and expectations. So how you managed and coped with those sorts of things can also kind of come up, in a similar way in a workplace context as well. And it doesn't mean we're stuck with them or you're destined to now just repeat all these patterns, but it's sort of just what the body does. It adapts to the environments around it. It learns ways to kind of cope and survive and manage. And so it sort of just does the same thing in like a workplace environment until we step back and understand, well, I see my body sort of doing this thing that it's learned to do. Is it still helpful for me now? Maybe sometimes it is, maybe sometimes it isn't. Are there other ways that I haven't sort of realized are available for me that serve me a little bit more?
I think that's such a critical question, isn't it? It's like, one, you notice, and often people get stuck there. Like, okay, now I see. Now I'm repeating patterns. All right.
Yeah.
But I think what you just highlighted there is like, that's the moment where you ask yourself, is this helpful right now? Like, do I actually want to be like this? And what would you say to those people right at that crux moment? Like, how do people start to kind of change behavior that is just so deeply ingrained? Yeah.
Well, I think firstly, it's really hard. Like, it's really hard. It sounds so simple. I'll
stop,
notice it and then I'll change it. It's really hard. And it's really...
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
It's sort of like step one. Makes it sound so simple, but it really isn't. And also it can be so insidious and so like deep rooted and unconscious in a way too. So even the noticing step can be really difficult as well. It creeps up without us really realizing we've kind of crossed our boundary, for example. Maybe I can share like a personal example of a recent experience. Yeah. I guess for me, I was thinking about starting a group practice and maybe hiring other counselors, and that's still something I might do in the future. But at the start of this year, I really sort of was thinking about doing that and was noticing myself like this chaotic energy of just got to do this and got to do that and hustling, silently hustling, you know, in a way, or maybe not so silently. I was complaining a lot.
Loudly hustling.
Very loudly, whinging a lot. But I was really busy and I just almost like had committed myself to this goal and, really wanted to make it happen. But I sort of noticed just this, I don't know, I guess stress that I was carrying, and chose to pause and actually sort of check in on it and reflect on it and understand what's going on for me. Why am I so stressed about this? Why, do I sort of, am I clinging so much onto this goal? And did some journaling and spoke to people and kind of uncovered that it was, so much of it was about my own ideas of success and starting a business and trusting myself and going out on my own. It was sort of this sense of, well, I've got to keep growing, I've got to keep kind of proving that this was a good idea. And, almost like maybe teenage me that was like, I'll show my parents that this was a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know, sort of unconscious parts, those blueprints, I guess, was sort of running the show a little bit, and until I paused, noticed it, and kind of became curious, I guess, about what is it that I'm really wanting most from work, from life. And I think it's pretty simple. Like, I think contentment really, it's this idea of my business will be successful, my work will be successful, and then I can be content. And I think once I realized that, it was a lot easier for me to sort of understand and let go and sort of realize, well, I'm actually pretty content already. I'm content today, and so I'm hustling for this future thing to ultimately get peace and contentment when there's an option, there's another way, which is I can choose contentment today, I can see my friends, I can work less, so yeah, I guess in summary of that, it's identifying like the deeper need or longing or existential kind of want that often drives some of these protective parts that we have, and then seeing if you can meet it in a way that's sort of nurturing to you.
Yeah, wow.
So that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I think your answer is almost like not like what did you do, but it's almost like what did you stop doing? It's like what did you kind of it sounds like there was like a bit of a letting go almost.
Yeah.
We've started to talk a little bit about work and how we show up at work, but I would love to get into a conversation with you more about relationships at work. And maybe a good place to start around that is, a conversation around power imbalances at work. What are some of the common workplace relationship issues that your clients might kind of come and talk to you about?
Yeah, I think the most common one would be related to leadership. People really struggling with the leadership style or a specific person that's a leader. And there's sort of other ones too, but that's probably the most common kind of theme I probably see when I talk to clients who are experiencing work issues.
Yeah, right. Like kind of like with their direct leader, like their direct manager.
Yeah, direct. Sort of usually like one person, a few people, but I guess that power imbalance kind of speaks to that. And I think maybe in part why that becomes such a challenging kind of relationship is because of the kind of powerlessness that is felt in that there's this sort of silencing, I think, that can happen of like, I can't say anything, or I have to just deal with it, or, there's consequences if I speak up, or, So I think the challenge with the leader or a manager and leadership in general, and then how that leads to this feeling of stuckness, trappedness, what can I do? I have to just listen. Powerlessness that can come with that is probably a recurring thing that I see clients talk about.
Yeah. And actually, as a therapist working with people with concerns like this, what do you say to them? I know everyone would be different, but I'm wondering, like, because obviously you're not there in the workplace, you can't actually see and experience those interpersonal dynamics. Like, how do you support people through that?
I think the first thing is really just having a space for them to be able to talk about it, to be able to be heard and understood. I think that's always the most important part of therapy, the relationship, the safe space, especially if there's a feeling of not being able to speak, to the person in authority, or if the workplace culture is kind of silencing in a way, or toxic, where they feel really disempowered there. Sometimes as a therapist, it takes my own sort of insight to realize when I need to step back and do less, and actually just the therapeutic benefit of that person being empowered to just speak freely when there's context where they don't actually have that. So sometimes that's what's needed. And to be honest, often I ask my clients too, like, what are you looking for here? Would you just like a space to talk? Would you like, some strategies, or what kind of would you like from this space too? So I like to be kind of collaborative and sort of led by them as well. And I think I can probably relate to that. Sometimes I just want to vent. Other times I want a solution. And, so I think it's the same for any human. It's just checking in with what someone wants and needs.
Yeah.
But yeah, if relevant, that's sort of what we were talking about before, understanding what happens in their body when there's an authority figure, or when someone's speaking to them in a way that's really domineering, or what's their responses. And to be honest, normalizing that too. I mean, if someone's bullying you, or there's a power imbalance, and you do feel stuck, like you can't do anything or speak, that can feel really unsafe, and it's normal to want to fawn, or it's normal to want to avoid. And so kind of normalizing some of those responses that our nervous system does when we're not feeling safe or heard. And I think that normalizing of this is what happens to all of us when we're feeling really threatened can be really de-shaming. Like, there's nothing wrong with you, but rather this is what our body does, and this is what the environment is kind of doing, or contributing to in a way. So sometimes just some I guess discussions about what's happening in their body can be helpful too.
It's so interesting, isn't it? It's like, as you highlighted, many people are in positions where they'll never get a chance to confront a really toxic boss or anything like that. But what you kind of highlighted is even creating an alternative space where people can speak freely, like that supports the body or supports the nervous system or supports the human to feel, I don't know, differently, I guess.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it kind of meets the need in a different context.
Yeah. One thing I want to bring up, which is like a little bit of a tangent, but overall related, is I want to talk about people's experiences of racism at work. This is something that we hear about a lot, like people of color in workplaces facing like racism or racial microaggressions, which people often have a hard time identifying as well. But this will go somewhere, but let me just share an example, right? So once I was on placement, this is in a hospital, so this is like within the health service. And it was at the end of the day, I was doing my notes, and then the two clinical leads were talking about their next intake of social work students, right? So they were talking, and it was a small office. It was like the size of this room. So I could hear them, like I could literally see them, and they could see me. And then these two women who were white, they were talking. They were like, oh, how did your interviews go today with the students? And then the other one was like, oh, you know what it's like students. And they were like, oh, yeah. And then she was like, I actually met a few good ones who were Chinese. And then the other woman was like, oh, okay. And then the first woman was like, yeah, often it's hard to take them because, like the clients don't like it when the students have names that they can't pronounce. I was like, hang on a sec, right? And then, so for context, it was like an inpatient unit. So obviously I also agree with this person. Like if you're really unwell, the last thing you need to think about is how to pronounce people's names. But what I did not like about that comment was the fact that she assumes that every patient is white when actually the patients on the ward are reflective of the overall population, which is very, very diverse within Melbourne. So then I was like, yuck, right? And then what I did was I told my supervisor at the time, and then like it caused a huge hoo-ha. But anyway, what I'm trying to get to with this conversation is like, can we talk a little bit about the systems that we exist within? Like, there's so much that we can do to support ourselves, right? And to find good workplaces. But sometimes the reality is there's just like systems at play that are really hard to navigate.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really important aspect to mention, that you could do all of the inner work and all of the individual stuff and reflect on your upbringing and so on. But we are living and working within so many forces and systems that are historical, that's at play. Things like racism, white supremacy, and capitalism as well, which kind of rewards that productivity culture, shames you for needing or wanting rest as well. And in terms of racism, it can just add to that sort of power dynamic that's experienced in certain spaces of, will the way that I present at work be understood or accepted? Do I need to mask or change aspects of myself, which is sort of this invisible, silent, I guess, mental load that we can carry as people of colour. I think it really also feeds this sort of these systemic sort of influences also feed into the experience of imposter syndrome that we can have at work as well. I was talking to my cousin actually about this recently, and she was talking about this really relevant sort of idea around this, which is we feel imposter syndrome as people of colour because there's a conditioned idea of what an imposter isn't, like someone who...
Oh, interesting. Hang on, say that again. So it's like...
So somewhere along the line, we would have learned that I'm an imposter, I'm a fraud, because this sort of person wouldn't be, someone who's loud or extroverted or confident in the room or can really be assertive, for example. And, these are sometimes things that we see with someone who's had privilege, not feeling like they don't belong in spaces, or we've got this model of whiteness that tells us what someone who belongs can look like.
Yeah,
and against that, we can feel like a fraud when that's not true, but that can be what we're told by systems around us.
Tell me, the $1,000,000 question, right? How do you work with a toxic boss? How do you survive?
God, you tell me.
Yeah, you tell me. No, I'm like, you came here, you tell me. Okay, I'll give you some context, yeah? Like, even think about if you are a newer migrant and you're in Australia on a skilled migrant visa, which means that your life and your ability to stay in this country is connected to your workplace.
Yeah.
And you don't really have the freedom and the flexibility to be kind of like, confronting a boss or even standing up for yourself, I think. I'm sure you do have that right to do so, but I can imagine that many people don't feel that way. And then if someone like that, where there is such a huge power imbalance already, if someone like that is facing a really toxic work environment or a toxic boss, like, I don't know, what should they do?
And yeah, so I guess in those situations, I think Western therapy would say assertive communication.
Yes, yeah, talk about that. Like,
yeah, I guess Western psychology would sort of talk about skills in assertive communication and how can you sort of assert your needs and sort of feelings and experiences in a way that channels maybe some of the frustration you're feeling into an assertive sort of way. So you're still expressing yourself, but you're, I guess, not sort of exploding with anger or keeping it in. It's sort of the balance, the middle path between those two extremes. And I think there's a place for that, and that's great. I think we can all, learn the skills of assertive communication, and that doesn't do any harm, but you can't sort of control whether someone listens, and I guess that's the challenge with a toxic manager or a toxic boss or a toxic workplace culture. You can do all of the things that, you learn all of the skills and do all of the work, but you can't really control how someone else behaves and someone else responds. It's kind of similar with boundary setting. You can set your boundaries and do it really clearly and assertively and, reasonably, as well. But if someone crosses them or expects you to cross them, that's not something that's always within our control. So you're sort of left in this challenging situation of, well, does this culture actually honor, what's important to me? Does this space really value, my needs and my boundaries? And that's a question that is important to ask sometimes if we can.
Yeah. I really like what you said about boundaries and you also have control in the expectations that you set of others. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing that, but it's like you can help other people understand where your boundaries sit.
Yeah. So how you come across can influence how someone responds to you.
Exactly.
Right,
like just say you have a toxic boss that keeps throwing stuff at you, like do this, do this, do this.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But then do you have agency to be like, actually, like, I'm not going to do that task because you asked me to do this task already? Or is it like I'm reliving my blueprints and I keep just like taking on that stress and taking on that work? Then you start to set this expectation that people can dump work on you. Right?
Totally. Yeah, that so happens, doesn't it? It's almost like, oh, this person will say yes, or they won't fight back, or they're willing to work till midnight or something. So then that sort of puts you in that position then of, the person that gets all the work and you say yes. And it's kind of, again, it's that interaction, I think, between the workplace overwork kind of culture and then your own sort of responses too, and how it's almost like that people-pleasing response is almost taken advantage of in a culture that takes advantage of it in a way.
My goodness, huh? As you say, there's no easy answer, right? And you kind of spoke a little bit about assertive communication, but just for those listening, like, could you articulate what that means or what that looks like?
Yeah. I think when I talk to clients about this, I often talk about the emotion of anger because I think assertive communication is usually like a way to channel your anger. So we need to get angry sometimes, and have permission to feel that. And the anger is really informative. Anger tells you when a boundary is being crossed or when there's a deeper hurt that's kind of underneath it. So usually for us to be assertive, usually there's a little bit of frustration or anger involved. That emotion might come up, which is somewhat empowering at times. It can sort of propel us to act or speak. So channeling anger into assertive communication. And I guess what that would look like would be, expressing kind of clearly like, hey, this is how I'm feeling in this situation. I really need this if that's possible. And really just sort of bringing that in and not sort of shying away from it. I think I like to use the idea of I language, that I feel like this or I'm experiencing this as a bit of a strategy sometimes for assertive communication. Often when we use kind of you language or you did this or you did that or you've really kind of, done this, people can get really defensive and not respond sort of as understandingly or as openly. So strategy, I guess, to sort of practice assertive communication would be some of that I language kind of framework. So I feel, and then even doing that, you're advocating for you. You're sort of bringing in, this is my experience, this is real, this is valid, which is sort of the message I think you're wanting to convey with that assertive communication.
And even if that was not the person's intention, like I felt upset.
Yeah.
I was really annoyed when you said this to me. Like, even if that was not their intention, they still need to know that you were upset, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really healthy too.
True.
And I don't know. Sometimes I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, it doesn't actually have to be anything bad at work when you communicate something like that. That's what I've been practicing too. Like, just to be like, please don't speak to me like that.
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, I didn't realize. Okay, I won't speak to you like that. And it can be positive, but I don't know. I don't think it was so positive when I was younger. And I always thought, like, are these like racial dynamics happening at work? But when I look back, I'm starting to think maybe it was more like I was like always so emotional. If something upset me, I couldn't control the emotions. So then any feedback I gave would have been really emotional. Whereas now it's like, I can like feel it, that hurt, let me sit with it, let me calm the emotions and then speak without emotion.
Yeah.
And then it seems to come across better. But
yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
a really good point. Yeah, you're speaking from that grounded kind of place in a way. You've sort of understood your emotions and what they're telling you. And then when you approach the conversation, you can be relatively kind of sturdy, stable, grounded.
Yeah.
It's kind of like sort of regardless of the other person's response, what's happening for them, how they sort of take it, you can still be sturdy and sort of clear. Actually, that makes me think I really like that word sturdy. I listened to it. I listened to a podcast recently, which was talking about actually a parenting podcast, which was quite interesting. But an example that they talked about in this podcast was like sturdy parenting, in that you're sort of grounded, you're regulated, and the child in this situation throwing a tantrum, this, that, as children are supposed to. And so the kid might be like, I really want to have ice cream at midnight. This is so unfair. Why can't I have ice cream at midnight?
Yeah.
And then you can validate and say, I get that. I get it. Who wouldn't want ice cream at midnight? I mean, it's great. It would be so amazing. But we actually can't do that today because otherwise you're not going to sleep, So you can be compassionate if that's the communication style that works for you. You can understand and hold space for someone's experience, but you're still kind of clear and grounded and sturdy on your values and your boundaries and your limits as well.
I feel like you're talking about parenting, but all I can think about is like the couples therapy. I know you do a lot of work in couples therapy as well. So can you help us dive into that world? And, maybe the question can be, what are some learnings that you've taken from couples therapy about how people can build trust in relationships?
Yeah, I think that's a really big theme, trust, in so many aspects of life when there's so much uncertainty in the world. But I particularly see it in couples therapy because I see couples coming in fighting about or having conflict about all kinds of things, dishes, domestic things. And often when you sort of dig deeper, the core is, can I trust this person? Not necessarily, it may be, but not necessarily will they lie to me or, betray me, but more so, will you be there for me? If I'm really struggling, are you going to show up for me? Can I rely on you? Can I count on you? And I think when we feel that people or workplaces and things around us really care and really will show up for us, we have a sense of trust and a sense of safety that then comes with that as well. So that's probably a little bit of what I've seen in the couples work. How do you really build a sense of trust that I can really rely on this person, on this relationship? And then from there, the sort of other conflicts or other issues almost reduce because there's a deeper sense of, okay, I think I'm okay. I think,
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Like that foundational trust is built.
That's it. Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like with couples, in terms of building trust, and this could be in any form of relationship too, but would you say trust is based on like small actions? Or the alternate to that is like, once I've had a boss in my past and they would always say, you have to trust me, Asami, you have to trust me. But then I just thought that was so weird. It's like telling people to calm down,
Yeah.
Like it's very, you're like, if I trust you, I trust you.
Yeah.
And I did trust that person too. So I don't know, like how does trust actually get built between two different people?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like telling someone to relax. It doesn't work. And try to sleep. You can't try to sleep. You just need to sort of fall asleep. It happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess with that analogy, it's sort of like setting up the conditions for relaxation to happen, for sleep to happen, and similarly for trust to happen as well. I think it is small actions relatively consistently over time. I think consistency, predictability builds trust. It's sort of, if the question is, can I rely on this person, then, repeated examples of reliability, is probably a great way, a micro sort of steps that become cumulative to build trust. Transparency, relative transparency. Everyone has their own inner worlds that are completely autonomous and individual and don't necessarily have to be shared completely and wholly in a relationship, but knowing, that someone, when they say something, they sort of mean it, or it's honest or transparent, can build trust as well. And again, that sort of consistently. So it is kind of just micro moves that build over time that create like a culture, I think, of trust within the relationship. And I guess a role of the person wondering whether they can trust the other is a little bit of a leap of faith if it feels safe enough as well, because there's always a risk in a person, in a job, in anything in a way. And, if we focus on all the ways we may not be able to trust based on maybe things in our past where we were betrayed and things like that, you'll probably find them. You find the thing you're looking for. If you're looking for examples of where someone is mistrustful, you might find them through your perspective in that situation. If I'm not wording this very well.
No, that makes sense. Like,
yeah, I guess that
if you
bias.
think someone is doing bad by you, then you will notice all the times that they do. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so it's kind of dual, I suppose, in that way. Like we need consistency and reliability and predictability from a person to build trust that creates the safety.
Yeah.
But no one's perfect. No one's 100%. They could forget something or make a mistake, and then that's where it takes a little bit of a leap of faith of, I'm going to attempt to trust. I'm going to try to sort of see the best in this person and give that a go and drop some of my protectors.
Yeah, wow.
And if those two things can work together, then I think trust can be built.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that focus on consistency as well. It's like overarchingly, 85% of the time you are a consistent, reliable figure, and then the 15%, of course, you got your bad days.
You're human.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about in the context of work? Like you kind of said, there are workplaces and it's a beautiful feeling to feel like I trust this workplace. I know that they'll show up for me. For me, in other work experiences, the base level of trust I felt is like, I trust that they will pay me, like that's literally it. And the rest is like, okay, I don't really have any idea whether I can trust this place or not.
Wow.
How does one manage, like, let me put it this way. Do you think people can survive in workplaces that they don't trust?
I mean, look, people can survive a lot of things. People are resilient.
That's true, yeah.
Whether there's sort of consequences on their well-being and mental health is probably another question. I think people can survive, but not thrive in environments like that. Yeah, at work. And in the context of work, it's interesting you mentioned I had trust in my previous workplace that they would pay me. And that's it, which sucks that's all that was there. Yeah, that's
and
terrible.
even then, they like paid us late sometimes.
Yeah, oh, that's awful.
That's like the worst.
It's a bare minimum.
Yeah, that's literally the bare minimum of going to work, right?
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, I was thinking when you said that I mean that's a whole other kind of domain of money, you know, and the sort of mixture of money in the environment of work. I mean, that's a lot of reasons why we work, to get paid.
Yeah.
And then we need money to kind of build the lives that we want to have. So, and sometimes there can be mistrust even in that domain of, like you said, paying you late, for example, or feeling undervalued in terms of, you know, when I work hard, will that be seen? Will that be rewarded financially, or will it not? You know, and so there can be a mistrust there around work as well. So even in that domain of money, I think that can come up, and it's an important one for workplaces to build that trust that, you know, we care about you, we want you to feel valued, and this is a way we can do that.
Yeah. What do people do? What can people do to take care of themselves just to survive at work? You know, there's, like, we're talking about bare minimum stuff.
I think if there's anything within the workplace that keeps you going, whether it's specifics about the work you do, whether it's the income you get, whether it's colleagues, really leaning on that as much as you can, sort of focusing on that, utilizing the resources you have within work to try and make your day kind of bearable. And then outside of work as well, you know, what does your life look like outside of work? Are there things that allow you to really switch off and still have meaning and value in your life, to then kind of bear the brunt of where you're at with work at the moment? So I think those kind of self-care things, as well as things that make your life worth living, you know, outside of work, sort of make work more bearable if it's not really exactly what you want it to be at the moment.
Sometimes I think in this economic climate too, like I was just talking to Marcus and Oscar as well. Like, I spent 12 years teaching yoga back in the day. That was like my first thing, because I was like, oh, I really like yoga. So then I literally dedicated 10 years of my life.
That's amazing, yeah.
But I was just reflecting, like, that was a long time ago. And then I cannot imagine being able to survive economically, like financially now, being like, oh, this is my passion, this is what I want to do. And then it makes me think, like, work can also be this thing where you just go and you make the money so that you can support your life and your beautiful hobbies and your, like, relationships and family outside of work, right? But for some reason, somewhere along the way, like, we all got tied in with, like, work is like this thing that's really connected to our identity or something. I don't know. Have you noticed trends like that?
I think where my mind goes is the generational kind of differences, and particularly with, like, migrant parents as well, or first generation migrants. Work meant such a different thing for them. It meant survival. It meant, it doesn't matter how I feel, I've just got to do it so my family can eat, you know. So work, you know, could have meant status as well, in terms of how accepted I am in the community. So the perception of work and what work meant was so different. And I think like, I know for myself, I can relate to sort of seeing a sense of sort of loss there of, oh, work couldn't be this thing that was a passion. For example, for my parents, it had to be a duty, it had to be a, you know, survival thing in a way. But in some ways there is a ease to that. Like, I think it's so nuanced, right? But it was sort of my parents didn't expect work to be anything else in a way. So they go in, do their thing. You know, my dad would have lunch with all his friends, and they'd all bring like different foods from different cultures, and that was almost enough for him to
like the lunch break.
Yeah, the lunch break,
Yeah.
and sharing it, and his colleagues, and he didn't really think about whether this was my deepest passion or not. And so he, I guess, didn't have the worries that come with that, but also had a lot of other worries that I'm privileged enough not to have because of the kind of life I guess my parents have given me, in that financial stress and job security and things like that. So, I guess it's two sides of the same coin, if that saying fits here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what my grandpa always says. It's so unprofound in English, but I'm not going to say the Japanese, but it's literally like when there's good things, there's bad things,
Yeah, it's always both.
Right? It's always both.
Yeah. I think as well, maybe they're a little related to like seeing that generation, or for example, your parents struggle in that way with work may kind of act as a motivating factor, that I don't want to just go to work and not care about it. I want it to be a purpose in a way as well. So yeah, I guess it's sort of like carrying some of their losses a little bit, in that they didn't have the privilege to be able to choose whatever job they could do, or even, do whatever course they wanted to do purely based on interest. It always had to be kind of survival first in a way. And so, so it's, I think also as a second generation migrant too, my parents really supported me with education and things like that as well. And it's sort of like, I kind of want to make something of it in a way as well, sort of use that opportunity to have a meaningful kind of job. I think that probably ties into their experience as well.
That's beautiful. I love that we keep coming back to this theme around it's not just individualistic. It's not just about me. Actually, the things that I want, I always hear a beautiful underpinning. It comes back to my family, and it looks different, very different for different people. But that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome, of course.
I wanted to ask you, this is something that we do for everyone. So it's a little bit left of field, but before we go, we always have 3 fun questions that we ask people before we say goodbye, and we always personalize the last question. So that one is specifically for you. So question 1, and the wording is really strange, so there's context for that.
Okay.
But question 1 is this. We're talking about work. What do you think about people who are super close to their colleagues?
I feel like there's a expectation in that question.
I know, right?
There's a right or wrong answer.
What do you think about it?
To be honest, I love it. Like, I personally have had beautiful relationships with colleagues in the past, and I think working for myself now, that's probably something I miss the most about just working alone. And I think part of why I want to also develop a group practice is to have colleagues again. And I think as a therapist as well, the work you do can be so heavy and intense that I miss the lightness. I miss the light convos about maths or, just having a coffee
just
and
nonsense,
stuff.
Right?
Yeah, nonsense. Yeah. And I think I've really personally valued the close relationships I formed with colleagues, and so at times in my life saw them more than I saw some of my friends, because you're there every day, and built a lot of intimacy through that as well. So I'm pro close relationships with colleagues.
I love that. Okay, next question is, when was honestly, when was the last time you actually took a mental health day?
It's been a minute. Actually. Now that I think about it.
Thank you for telling everyone that. That's really good.
Not for a while. I mean, and maybe part of it is because I do structure a lot of leave into my calendar. Like in December, January, I took 4 weeks off, and I love summer, so I want to be not working during summer. So I always take a lot of leave then. And then the end of last year, I feel like I had my brother got married, and I took a bunch of time off. So I had a lot of leave. Yeah. So I didn't really feel like I needed it. But it's interesting you say that, because I've been thinking I really need it at the moment. It's been like a really busy start to the year, and I can feel it in my body, just this sense of almost like ineffectiveness. Like I'm trying to do a task and I'm just not really doing it very efficiently, and it's not usually how I am. Like, this is my body telling me you need a break. And even just like dreading the work week and stuff like that on a Sunday, I don't usually feel that way. So if I am, then usually there's something going on for me. So I've been thinking about actually scheduling one in the next, not really a day, more a week.
Yeah.
Just a week off.
A mental health week.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm pro that. I mean, a day is so short.
And then you're waiting for the next day and you're like, oh no, it's gone. So yeah, a whole week off where there's really nothing scheduled, I think for me feels very liberating, feels like freedom. I can just do whatever I want, let my brain do whatever it wants.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, good reminder for you.
Yeah.
And then this is your question. Sanduni, before we recorded, I asked you about your cat. So this last question is specifically for you and your cat. What has your cat taught you about boundaries? Again, it's like quite loaded, isn't it? It's like, I'm sure your cat has taught you something.
That no matter how many boundaries you set, they may not listen. Sometimes people or animals don't always respect your boundaries. And the specific thing that's come into my mind is she wakes me up at 4 a.m. because she wants food. And sometimes there's already food there.
But she's like,
she
hey.
still wakes me up. She's like, wake up. She's just like, come on, like I've been hanging out alone. It's time to get up now. And it's dark outside. So,
at 4?
Yeah, sometimes at 4.
Okay.
Once it was at 2 and I was like, come on.
That's still nighttime.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she doesn't respect my boundaries.
I love that.
And yet I still love her and I live with her. I don't know what that says about me.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. My cat is like, my cat does not respect my boundaries.
Yep.
But I love her.
I still love her. Yeah.
That's so sweet. Bless our cats, hey? Not that I have a cat, but I have a dog that's like a cat who also doesn't really care about me too.
I love that.
But thank you so much, Sanduni. That was like, it was lovely to have you in the studio. It was a beautiful chat. I think we went through like relationships in all forms. We kind of touched into work as well, and really complex, annoying work relationships too. And lovely to hear about your cat. We always love animals. Yeah, shapes and sounds.
I should have brought her in.
But everyone, thank you so much for tuning into this convo. We would love for you to find us on Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube at Just Shapes and Sounds. You can like and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. Download this episode for offline listening. There was so much in there, so use it to reference back when you're struggling with work. You can leave us a review on Spotify and share this episode with your friends, because word of mouth really helps to destigmatize mental health in Asian communities. And if you want to connect with Sanduni, you can find Sanduni on our Asian Australian mental health practitioner list over on our website, justshapesandsounds.com. So everyone, stay safe, stay silly, and see you soon. This is a production from Shapes and Sounds. It's hosted by Asami Koike, Marcus Lai and Oscar Abe, and produced by Yo Chung. We're proudly supported by the Victorian Department of Health's Diverse Communities program. All thoughts and ideas you hear are independently ours and our guests.